Hello, beautiful, light-filled souls. My name is Trisha Barker, and I am here with Howard Storm. I'm so excited to talk with him because I have read his book, and many of these interviews, I've been lucky enough to receive the books after I've interviewed people, but I read Howard Storm's book last year. I even posted a book review about it, and I'd like to start with a question that, it brings us to this point in time, but I loved your intellectual curiosity with the angels. So when you're out of form, you had lots of questions for them. And, that was an interesting part of your near-death experience. And I'm curious now, because we're all at a different point in our lives now, what your questions would be to the angels.
Oh, quite different. Because at the time I had basically no religious or theological background whatsoever. So, people have asked me all kinds of things like, did you ask them about the Blessed Mother? Did you ask them about the apocalypse, the end times? It's like, and invariably my answer is no. Matter of fact, I didn't even know, I didn't know what an apocalypse was.
So you really didn't have a lot of religious background. I remember you singing the song "Jesus Loves Me," and that was
my religious background was basically childhood up to the age of like 14 or 15, and then it ended, and I became, starting with. I started reading philosophy, but people like Nietzsche then led me into existentialism, and I became a big devotee of Sartre and Camus and Heidegger and all that stuff. When I say Heidegger, not that I ever understood Heidegger, but I read him.
Yeah, same here. I took those philosophy classes.
He's pretty obtuse.
So back to my question, though, what would you ask them now?
Actually, I wouldn't ask him anything. You know why?
Why is that?
Not because I know everything, but I know that in heaven, in that proximity to Jesus, God, you have access to everything. And so I would say something like, where's Paul? I want to talk to him.
Right. You get right to the point of who you want to speak with. And
well, yeah, after hanging out with Jesus, I would want to, I love Paul because he's so human. I think people are very wrong to dislike Paul because of his humanity. It's like, give the guy a break. He had a tough row to hoe. Who in the world could begin to imagine that they were able to persevere and remain faithful and actually accomplish what Paul did. It's an amazing story, and I think that it's pretty well documented that it's a true story, the story of Paul. And wretched man that I am, I do not do those things that I would do, but I do those things that I would not do. Who can save me from this? And it's amazing stuff. I love him, and I think he's misunderstood because people don't understand the context of the world they live in, which was incredibly hostile. As in, he was actually murdered. He was killed. Yeah. He was stoned to death outside Athens and had a near-death experience and writes about it.
So you didn't have a lot of religious knowledge before your near-death experience. Had you heard of
near-death? I didn't have any religious
Did you have any knowledge of near-death experiences before your near-death experience?
In fact, I belonged to, when I was a professor at the university, we had a book group that read a book a month and just had dinner and lots to drink. Discuss the book, and I don't know how it happened, but somebody suggested we read Raymond Moody's Life After Life. And we all came to the conclusion that when a person is in extreme trauma, like, being close to death, that the endorphins, we understood it. Endorphins go over and you have this euphoric, blissful, delusional experience, like a hallucination, or basically hallucination, and it's a way that the body copes with extreme trauma, and then you die. And that it was absolutely not in any way proof or evidence of life after death, only proof that people's bodies are capable of providing, relief from
And
trauma.
And I had, before my near-death experience, I had a lot of smart, scientific-minded friends who were very agnostic, and I was agnostic, and that was kind of my belief too. I had a little bit of a Whitman-esque belief that, maybe we merged with something, that was
Uh-huh.
beautiful and light-filled, but, our bodies were just dust at that point. And yeah, so that was your knowledge of near-death experiences before. I think what's profound is how dramatically you changed after your near-death experiences. And one of my favorite parts of your book is when you go into a church and you're overwhelmed with this joy and this profound praise of God. And the way you write about it, it's so cute. It wasn't that type of church where you praise that way, and it kind of embarrassed your wife at the time. And I thought about how I walked into churches after my near-death experience, just random ones. I had this traveling job, and there was one that was just so filled with love and light and beauty that I sat on that back row and I was just bawling,
Yeah. Oh, I know the feeling.
tears. Yeah, tears were just, and I was like, oh, that light, that love, I miss it. So what were some of the surprising after effects that you didn't write about in your book when because I know we all leave out things in our books, but what really surprised you about how much you had changed?
Well, several things. One is that I assumed that I was now going to be a saintly person without the cravings and the desires that I'd had before. It didn't work out that way. I was sick for a very, very long time. I was in a hospital on critical list for over a month, and then I had to have more surgery and stuff like that. So it was many, many months of recuperation and another surgery, big surgery and stuff. Anyways, but I thought that, like, when I got well, but by the way, in case anybody's wondering about this, when you're really sick, you have no libido. That it takes vacation, so I was like happy about that. I mean, I was like, oh great, I no longer have a libido. I no longer have any desire, for that.
So you could be totally spiritual in that place.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like, and I'm thinking about I got to quit smoking, so I'm trying to you know, um, well, it's pretty hard to have cigarettes when you're in the hospital, but it's like, still, I was down to one a day. I'm like really having trouble giving that one up,
Yeah.
And I lost my desire for alcohol, so I wasn't doing any drink. I mean, I occasionally have a drink now. I don't have anything against alcohol, but I mean, I used to be a heavy drinker, but now, but anyways, but I thought, I mean, even more importantly, I thought like I would no longer experience anger or envy or jealousy or blah, blah, just all that stuff. And after my experience, I found out, I mean, especially after I got well, like everything that I used to struggle with, I get to struggle with, it all came back, and they've all been challenges that I've struggled with, some successfully, some not so successfully.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because a lot of people look to near-death experiencers for all these answers, like we're just, we have this direct link to God. And I wanted to write a book that it humanized me, about my struggles that I continued to battle on many levels. What did change, and I wonder if this changed for you, is I was aware of my connection to the light. So if I did something that was not in line with what I knew to be good and true, I was hyper aware of it, and I usually self-corrected pretty quickly.
Yes.
Sometimes I was 22, so sometimes I was even a little rebellious, and I was like, all right, God, I'm taking the night back tonight. You can just leave me alone. This is my night.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, I was self-corrected pretty quickly, and I didn't have that awareness before. Did you have something like that?
Yes, Martin Luther said, sin boldly. And by that, he meant, since we're sinners, accept the fact that you're a sinner and accept the fact that you sin. Well, I sin, but I really regret it. And I'm unfortunately aware of it and try and repent of it, and do try to not repeat that. That's what Jesus told me. He told me, he said, yeah, sure, you're going to make lots of mistakes and sin a lot. But he said, the thing now is, think about it and try not to do it again. See how you can live differently. And that's it. I don't try to be too hard on myself. I told someone the other day, I said, I aspire to be a vulgar man. No.
And why is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, the word vulgar has this negative connotation, but it just means common, That's all the word. I mean, the root of the word, the Latin vulgate, it just means the common language, common Latin. I want to be a common man. I don't want to pretend to be a saint. My aspiration is to be authentic. And I find that to be a real struggle, because one of the other things that I think is a huge problem with near-death experiencers, and I include myself in that category, and I'll include you in that category too.
Oh no, what's coming?
It's egotism. And I've been turned off by some near-death experiencers because I found that their ego was getting in the way of their truth and their authenticity. And so when I say I want to be a vulgar man, a common man, I want to be authentic, because I don't want to shock you, because I know you love me so much, but I am the most common of men. I mean, I'm just a man, and I'm not, and I don't want to pretend to be something else. I have, you have, and I did the kind of work that I was a professor for 20 years, and now I'm a pastor. They're ego-enhancing professions. You can't stand up in front of a group of people and pretend to be an authority on something without it finally getting to, Kurt Vonnegut once said, let me just get this in, Kurt Vonnegut once said, we are what we pretend to be. Be careful what you pretend.
I love Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, and when we pretend to be an authority on something, it's dangerous.
So that brings me to a question which, and you might disagree with Anita Moorjani, but she talks about ego and empathy needing to be in balance. And that's the way she describes it, that we need a healthy ego to protect ourselves from narcissists and abusers and crazy people in this world who want to harm us. But we also need empathy. And if they're out of balance, if you see someone who's too empathetic, then they get walked on. If you see someone who's too egotistical, they're just a joke, because, everyone can look at their ego and see that it's way out of balance. So, do you agree with her in that sense, that we need both? Or do you think, oh no, just throw the ego out to be in this total flow?
Oh, no, I think she's absolutely right. But the problem is, I mean, it sounds simple, but I think that it's not just a daily struggle, it's an hourly struggle. Because we are masters of self-deception. I mean, if there's anything that human beings are good at, it's self-deception, which is a conceit, it's pride. The origin of all sin is that. And that's a classical understanding. That's not, my personal revelation, hubris. Going back to the Greeks before Christianity, but anyways,
but
so we have to watch that balance all the time, because I agree, we're not we are supposed to be servants of all. The Bible actually says slaves to all. Jesus told us to be slaves to all, which is pretty tough to stomach, because I'm not you may like me and I like you, but I'm not actually willing to be your slave, you know what I mean? And I'm sure you're not interested in being my slave, but Jesus tells us to do that. Now we know that what that means is to serve each other, and
Yeah, well, I don't know if you feel this way, but my happiest moments after my near death experience are moments when I've been in service to others. So I'm
Right.
sure as a
Yeah.
minister, when you lose yourself completely, I mean, the ego is out of it when you're worried about someone's life and what's happening to them, and you're trying to find out ways and resources to help them. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no greater feeling on earth to know
Right.
that you contributed to someone's life in a positive way. So yeah, service.
And
Has
I,
that been a part of your life that you've felt
yeah,
like
and
you're
and
closer
I
to
know
God?
that in your profession, you are given ample opportunity by your students to be of service to them, more than sometimes you probably can bear. I mean,
Yes.
there's days when, like, I don't know if I can handle one more.
Yeah.
you know,
Especially when I taught junior high. That
yeah,
was, whoa,
yeah.
you're part parent, but certainly. Yeah. So interesting. And now I do want to come back to your after effects, though, before we get into your near death experience. There were a couple of things in your book that I liked. And one of them was you said that there are far more angels than there are people, and they're really forcing us to be more loving. Do you think that they're winning that battle, or do you think that they're losing that battle right now?
Um, Speaking for the whole world, I think they're losing.
Yeah.
Um, I, I never thought of myself as a cranky old man, but I think I could be identified as a cranky old man because I'm becoming more and more pessimistic and critical of our society. And I think, I mean, the only place I really know anything about is the United States of America. I'm not, no means can speak with any kind of real authority, be it a place, except that I know that in Europe, average church attendance is between 1% and 3%. In Christian, quote, Christian Europe. And if you talk to Christians in Europe, they're like, like the church is on the verge of extinction here.
Wasn't it Fenway or Norway that's considered the happiest place on earth, though? I
Huh?
think there's been some research that
Yeah,
Fenway or Norway, one of those countries, is supposedly the happiest place on
right,
earth.
right.
But,
Extremely wealthy country.
yeah.
I see the battle as between materialism and faith. And I'm not just talking about Christian faith, I'm talking about any faith in God. And my experience is that materialism is winning very successfully over faith. And I have experienced this in Belize, where I've done a great deal of mission work. In the little village that I worked in for 13 years, I see materialism winning over faith. And there are revivals going on in the developing world, like places in like South Korea and Africa, and etc. But those haven't been really. I haven't personally experienced those things. So um, I think the world's in big trouble. And when you consider what we're doing to the world ecologically,
Yes.
people misunderstand the difference between climate and weather. Weather is quite unpredictable, and it changes not only every day but every hour. And you can't really draw much conclusion from what's happening with your local weather. But in terms of the climate of the world, there are some real changes. And for example, I've read that the acidification of the oceans due to increased carbon dioxide is dramatically changing the ocean, which is really, really bad news for the whole planet. I mean, people talk about, increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and ozone and stuff like that, but there's other things going on that are really, really scary. So we have the ecological disaster, we have the rise of materialism, the decline of faith. And here's the thing that's so strange is that for everybody in the world, there's more opportunity, more wealth, more food, more security, more healthcare, more everything that every human being has ever desired. There's more possibility of access to those things. Now, I'm not dismissing the people that still live in poverty, but at least that there may have a tiny opportunity towards it. But in the United States, in the history of the world, we are the richest, most powerful, freest people in the whole history of the world, and anybody in the whole world that has ever lived would love to live in the United States. And Americans are not happy. They're leaving the churches in droves and becoming very pessimistic and very materialistic. What's going on?
I want to draw a connection between service and unhappiness, because there's a lot of people in this country who, go to Costco, hoard things, they're scared to death.
Hey, hands off Costco. I really like Costco.
No, but I'm talking about people who, they are not outward focused. They're inward focused about, their materialism and what they're packing up, what they're saving, what they can do to survive. And they would be so much happier if they spent their day giving more away and being more a part of their community. Like the joy that I feel when I give to an organization that helps human trafficking instead of buying designer jeans is way, way more profound than those designer jeans. And I think it's a switch that people have to make in their minds to go, you know what? I feel more joy when I give more. And it's very hard for Americans because we're just inundated with advertising, and that we connect success and health and happiness to our full well-being. So I think that switch is important for Americans, and just taking a darn break. Like when we had a gas shortage here in Texas, briefly, I thought about your book and about people shooting each other at gas pumps and, descending into that kind of violence. And I was like, people just need to go home and chill, in these moments, eat what's in the refrigerator, reach out to people around them, become a community instead of like this complete individualistic mentality. And other countries are way more connected and see themselves as one. Like I taught in South Korea, and, the culture there is much more communal in this sense. And so there is this, I want to help you just because you're a human being type of feeling, which happens a lot. So we can get off on this side topic about America for a long time, but I do want to ask you about that part of your book because it freaked me out. Did you get a time period about where you saw America descending into deep violence?
Chaos.
Did you get a particular time period, or could you tell me a little bit more about that part of the book?
I'm reluctant to pretend to be a prophet, but I do know what Jesus showed me and what he told me. So people always say, they always frame it like it's my prediction, and it's like, no, I'm reporting. What I tell people? I says, if you got a problem with this, talk to Jesus. Don't tell me, because it's not mine. It's his.
Right. Because a lot of people make predictions and they're totally wrong. So
he was talking about 1985 that this would be this more beautiful world would have come about in 200 years, but the transition can be one of two ways. There can be God's preferred way, which is worldwide conversion, or the other way is global chaos, which would mean a huge reduction in the world population and for a while the well-being of everybody. And that's not far off.
So that sounds very much like Revelations.
I'm hoping that I hope I die before it happens, because when I say not far off, I'm dreading what they're showing me, because when it comes, you know what I'm going to do?
What's that?
When the marauders come, I'm going to go stand out in the street and tell them to go to hell. So
that they'll shoot you. Because we near death.
I don't want to buy an AK-47 and, engage in the battle.
Because we near-death experiencers are not afraid of death. It's funny, you bring up that moment. I really do. I hope that peace and love can transform this world. And there are people who think
differently. Let's work for that. Let's do that.
there are people who think about all this differently from you, about the environment, and they send energy to the oceans. And then there are other people who are, deeply engaged in cleaning up the oceans and educating people about climate change. And, that there's a lot that people do in a myriad of ways to combat a lot of these things. And I always come back to the fact that love is the most important transformer
Right.
of situations. So if we can give more love to others through service and through helping this world, then maybe we can make a shift. But the way you phrase that, you're saying like everyone needs to convert to Christianity to avoid this
No,
disaster?
convert to God.
Convert to God. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was a little, when I did not have the same type of religious near-death experience, though I did have one little piece of information that sounded very much like Jesus. I heard be like a little child during my near-death experience, and that is biblical, and it is tied to the wisdom of Jesus. And so I do want to get into just your near-death experience, but before we do, I've heard Skeptico, your interview on Skeptico, and he brought up an interesting point about Eben Alexander saying that this is not about religion, the experience of the near-death experience, that it's about love and transformative experiences. Why did you go into religion and become a minister?
Oh, well, thank you. That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that.
Really?
Yeah. My experience first was hellish, and then my experience with Jesus, with him, educating me and loving me and healing me. And I came back. So one of the things that I did was I wasn't ambulatory, but I got people to bring me major books on world religions. And I did happen to have a Bible, so I read the Bible. And I read the Bhagavad Gita, and I read a book called the Bible of Buddhism, which was a compilation, about 800 pages of Buddhist teachings. And I read the Quran, of course, and I read a lot about Baha'i faith, which I liked very much. And I very strongly concluded that the most wisdom and the most God-inspired book was the Bible, of the things that I read. And then I didn't know, okay, so like Bible, that would be, following Jesus, that'd be Christianity, like what kind of Christian? So what I was doing, I'm not ambulatory, okay? I'm at home recuperating, and I would get the yellow pages. The yellow pages used to have like, 20, 30 pages of churches listed in the greater Cincinnati yellow pages. So I'd take my finger and run it up and down the pages and I'd say, just stop, God, stop my finger when I hit the church you want me to go to. It didn't work. I did this a number of times, and I'm getting like kind of annoyed with God. It's like, okay, we're going to try this again, God. Pay attention now. It's real simple. Just stop my finger. It's like a Ouija board. You can do this, and nothing happened. So it's like, oh man, where do I go? And then I actually thought about Unitarianism, because I understood that they were like really open to everybody and like, affirmed other religions. So that's pretty cool. And so it's like, and I was still intrigued by Baha'i, and didn't know where to go. And a woman that I knew, who I had hired at Northern Kentucky University in the art department, called me up, asked me how I was, and she just happened to hit me when I was in that looking for a church mode. And she said, why don't you come to my church? It's like a mile from your house. And it's United Church of Christ. And I said, what's United Church of Christ? And she said, well, it's the joining of congregational and blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, that's what I was raised in. I was raised as a Congregationalist. And then she said to me, maybe you should grow where you were planted. And that hit me like a anvil in the side of the head.
Yeah.
So I went to that church, and you had made reference to it when I went there. I had this like incredible Epiphany. The church was full of angels, and they were, And I also want to add that I was also very aware at the same time that the church was made up of a bunch of sinners like me, because my big hesitancy about going to church was I was certain that if I went to a church, they'd spot me as a bad guy, as a sinner, and that they would despise me and throw me out. I just knew that was going to happen. That there was, they hid the billboard outside the church. Sinners are not welcome here. Which of course is not true, but that's what a lot of non-churchgoers think, that like there's all these holy Joe hypocrites. Of course, we know they're hypocrites, and they don't want us. But anyway, so I went there, and I was very aware of the humanity of these people, and they were very nice to me. Not pushy or anything, just nice. And I fell in love with the people. And when I was there a little while, a woman by the name of Joyce Schweitzer came up to me, and she said, this was privately, she said, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "What do you mean? What am I doing here?" And she said, "You don't belong here." And I said, that kind of hurts. What do you mean by that? Because I was thinking negatively. And she said, "You have the Holy Spirit, and this is not a spirit-filled church, and you won't fit in." And I said, "Maybe that's why I'm supposed to be here. I don't know."
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, yeah, I think it's the Dalai Lama who says that it's easier for us to worship in whatever religion is most prevalent in the area where we are at. And so he encourages Americans to go to Christian churches, or, if you're in a country where to worship, do you kind of agree with this statement that whatever is prevalent,
totally
go there?
I've said that, people email me or call me or whatever and ask me all the time, where should I go? And I says, well, like, what's near you? What's near you? Catholic Church? Yeah, that would be the one. I would definitely check it out.
Right. Because and I had a long struggle with this. I love meditation, love Buddhism, but there just aren't a lot of great temples, and so eventually I found myself in, of all things, a Bible church. But it's just so beautiful and wonderful, and I love the minister, and I get a lot out of it. And who knew, that my path would take me full circle to that, but it's a great place to worship. And
I want to be part of the culture. I don't want to be, the holy guy standing on the mountaintop pontificating about what's right and wrong with the world. I want to be, when I say, go back to this theme about wanting to be authentic and wanting to become, I want to be down in the muck, literally in the muck with everybody else.
It's where the real work is done.
Yeah, I spent all day yesterday with a guy who, I spent the whole day with him. And like one of the first things he said to me, he said, "Well, I'm sorry, I smoked some marijuana before I came here to relax me." And I'm like, whatever, okay, let's move on. Let's keep going. I'm just like, oh, great. Because, if I was a real therapist, I would have booted him out.
Interesting point. And we're going to get right to your near-death experience. I did not have a hellish near-death experience. I think my family, who's very evangelical and religious, would have liked to have seen me have a hellish experience, but I didn't. I was 22. I was kind of a wild kid, but I was in rebellion to a lot of abuse and a lot of things that happened in my background. And I felt as if God needed to show me that I could be totally loved, and that, the angels were there to work through me in the classroom, and that there's so much more magic and beauty in this world than I could have possibly imagined at that moment. And my experience was very loving and profound, and it's what I needed. Do you think that we get what we needed? Like, do you think that you may not have changed as profoundly had you not had the experience that you had?
Oh, you're hitting a raw nerve here. I hope and pray that nobody ever goes through what I went through, because I have never told anyone what really happened and what it was like for me. It was really bad, really, really bad.
Oh, Howard.
And I think it was an incredible gift of love that God gave me to do that.
Yeah.
because sometimes for therapeutic reasons, we need to go down to the bottom before we can see our way out. There's a saying in AA. I've never been a part of AA. I've been a part of Al-Anon, but it's a big saying in AA where we talk a lot of AA stuff in Al-Anon. You can't go up until you've hit the bottom. You got to go down in the gutter before there's change. Like when you talk to AA people and you're talking about an alcoholic that one of the first questions is, have they hit bottom yet? They go, no, and I said, well, not time for them.
Wow.
Not time for them to go to a meeting. They got to go to the bottom first.
Wow. So you didn't write about everything.
I went to the bottom, but I went into the cesspool bottom, and I'm trying to keep this clean.
Yeah.
I went into the cesspool bottom.
So you didn't write in your book about everything that you experienced in that realm?
By no means, and I don't talk about it. I get upset just thinking about, I'm not even talking about it, and I get upset, just thinking about it, because it was brutal. And I'm not just talking about, for me emotionally, I'm also thinking about all the souls were there, because they're my brothers and sisters. They're yours, not just mine. They're your brothers and sisters too. Your brothers and sisters are in that cesspool, and they don't see their way out. They're my brothers and sisters, and they don't see their way out. And I don't know what I can do to help them. I've got some ideas, but I'll put that aside. But there's plenty of people living there and in that direction right here and now, and I'm trying to do what I can.
So no matter how tormented someone is, do you think that and I believe this, that they still have the ability to call out to God, as you did, to call out to Jesus and to rescue themselves?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, the thing that drives me crazy is that it's so simple. It's so easy to call out to God and have your life totally changed. And you can go from despair to joy. You can go from pain to bliss. You can find, all your problems aren't going to be solved immediately, but with the help of God, you will find the solutions to your problems. You find a way through all the difficulties of life, and find a community of support through faith communities. It's like, and the thing is that in real churches, real synagogues, real temples, it's all free, no cost, no obligation. Because you got a bunch of people just living to try and be helpful and supportive to someone.
Yeah, you bring up this very weird situation, but I was briefly a big sister, and the mother of the child, she left her children with a child molester. That was her babysitter. And so I had to call CPS and, deal with all this. And I was like, there's a church walking distance from your house. Like, go there, find someone there to watch your kids, for God's sake, just pull yourself out of this misery and, see the light, that there's a path, to goodness. There's a path to a better life. And sometimes people, they literally just don't see their way into a better situation. And, that's a big part of that. So this is a little bit off topic, but do you see people sometimes pick up on ghosts or entities? Do you think that those are lost souls in hell?
I don't think they're in hell. I think they're lost souls. I think they're for reasons that I don't entirely understand. I've got some opinions, but they're just opinions. They are stuck, because what hell is it simply means separation from God, and it could be any variety of things. There's infinite possibilities of what hell could be, and those souls are clearly not in heaven. So for some reason they have. According to some people, they're stuck. They have attachments to this world, and they haven't moved on. It's not a good place to be a lost soul, but they haven't moved on.
Yeah. So I won't make you go too far into talking about hell, but I do want you to talk about your near-death experience, and I'll just
Yeah.
let you talk at this point. But you were very ill, and you did um, see hell. So you want to start at that point?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that both from my personal experience and everything that I've been studying theology for over 30 years now, um, God doesn't put anybody in hell.
Yes.
God doesn't punish anybody. Those are misunderstandings and misinterpretations of God's word. What hell is it's the reward for people that despise God. And despising God means apathy. The greatest form of hate, the greatest form of violence is apathy, which means indifference. And that's what I had become. And my faith was materialism. And so what I believed, in all of my PhD friends, and all of my friends all had their terminal degrees, believed that if you can't measure it, see it, weigh it, count it, it simply doesn't exist. Totally materialistic. So therefore, God doesn't exist. Angels don't exist. Of course, there's no heaven. There's no hell. This is all there is, and that we're driven by our sort of base animal desires, which we need to gratify. Very important to gratify those desires, and perpetuate our genes, and then you die. That's what I believed. And when I say I believed it, I mean I knew that, and all of my friends knew it, and my friends, both the people that I'd gone to school with and now as a faculty member at school, we knew that we were the smartest people on the planet, and knew a lot more than those silly Baptists and Catholics and Methodists and Presbyterians and Buddhists and Sikhs and Hindu, whatever. We knew that those people were just, those were primitive superstitions that people used to invent in order to explain why there was thunder and lightning, and why their cattle all got sick and died, whatever. But
You've summed that up pretty well. That's how some people believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was dying at Cochin Hospital, June 1st, 1985, people asked me if I prayed, and it's like, I'm trying to explain to you, like, the last thing in the world I would have done was pray. I would have sooner jumped off the Eiffel Tower than pray. I mean, it's like, what an absolutely silly notion. I did ask repeatedly at the few times that a nurse ever came into the room, because I never saw a doctor there until after my near-death experience. I asked for morphine. I asked for a doctor, because the pain of the hole in my duodenum, which was leaking hydrochloric acid and other delightful digestive juices into my duodenum. I was dissolving myself. I was digesting myself on the inside. And if you want to know what that feels like, get a red hot coal out of a fire and stick it inside your gut. That's what it feels like. And the problem was as the digestive juices migrated throughout my abdominal cavity, it went from a point to an area to my whole abdomen. And the reason why I had to have the second surgery was because of the scarification due to that and the sepsis that I suffered afterwards.
Yeah, so you were aware of too much. And I was aware 17 hours before I went into surgery too. No painkillers or anything. And that's a terrible place to be. Some people are able to leave their body and disassociate from it. I didn't until...
Yeah. I thought about trying that. It didn't work for me. I also thought, what I kept thinking, why am I not unconscious? I thought when it got bad, you got to be unconscious, or you had some sort of euphoric thing going on. And it's like, it ain't working for me. So any kind of, the slightest movement only agitated the pain. And people tell me, well, the reason why you had your near-death experience was because of all the narcotics you've been given. I'm like,
no,
don't seem to be listening to me. I begged for anything and I was given nothing for 10 hours. Nothing. What about nothing? Don't you understand? It's just really irritating.
And it's so hard to describe how I know the difference between a drug-induced state and that state. And it's so clear and it's so different from anything we ever experience in form. And that's, I think, for us, largely what convinces us.
Yeah. When I lived in San Francisco from 1966 to 1972, my wife and I were given lots of recreational opportunities, which we imbibed in and enjoyed. So in the famous words of Jimi Hendrix, I am experienced. Thank you very much.
Yes. So am I. It was the 90s, a different time period. But...
Oh, wow, you missed it when it was.
Yeah, we were trying to relive it.
Like we had some really heavy trips. You know what I'm talking about now?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And nothing like a near-death experience. No.
No. And people ask me if it was a dream, psychologists say we have many dreams every night. Now, I don't remember many dreams. I usually wake up with, from a dream, and no relationship between a dream. And I also know it's not a hallucination, and I won't go into it, but if you go look up the word hallucination in a medical textbook, there's no comparison, because those are psychotic episodes that are destructive. And my near-death experience was the healthiest thing that ever happened to me in my entire life. I mean, it really was, and I'm not saying this biblicalism, but it really was my second birth,
Interesting.
I'm not humming, it's you.
Yeah, there's something going on outside.
Oh, so when the nurse came in and said that they were unable to locate a doctor, this was at 8:30 at night. I'd been in the hospital since 11. I went in at 11. Or shortly after 11, and they were unable to locate a doctor. See, I'd never actually been under any doctor's care, because there was no doctor. It was a Saturday in Paris, like there was no doctor at the biggest city hospital in Paris in the surgical wing.
Wow.
I'd seen 2 doctors in emergency, and they were very nice, but they didn't do anything. They just sent me over to surgery. I mean, they diagnosed me and told me I had an hour to live. That's what they told me. And that I would be having surgery right away. So they sent me to surgery, and unbeknownst to them, I'm sure there wasn't anybody to do the surgery. So that's why I didn't get any meds. Because I was asking them for meds, and they said, no, we can't give you meds because the doctor's going to give you meds.
Same thing. Yeah, they couldn't find a neurosurgeon to operate on me because one had been off duty for a long time, and the other one didn't want to come in because I didn't have health insurance. And so I was just there, strapped to a board, waiting for a doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, the nurse said, no doctor. So that's when I told my wife, I said, tell my parents that I love them. And I said goodbye, tell my kids, tell my friends, blah, blah, blah. I love you. And she was crying like I'd actually never seen anybody in my life cry like that. I mean, she was crying from the soles of her feet all the way up, and just shaking and throbbing, and and she sat down, and I looked at her and I said, time for me to go. So I checked out. Really, really easy. I found it the easiest thing in the world to die, which is, for me, I was having a lot of trouble breathing. I actually, for the last several hours, all I was doing was trying to breathe, because I had enough sense to know that if you stop breathing, that would be a bad thing. So, it was very, very hard to breathe. So what I was doing, here's what I was thinking about for the last few hours. Breathe air in, push the air out.
Tough place to be.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
So Did
So
you
all I had to do was just stop doing that, and I went unconscious.
did you pop out of form
No,
quickly?
no, I
No.
didn't pop out at all.
Hmm.
I awoke. I was standing there. I felt absolutely physically more real, more alive, and completely healed than I'd ever done in my life. So the first thing I did was I did a reality check, which consisted of taking my hands, and I felt myself from the top of my head, felt myself all the way down, right down to my feet. And it's like feeling good. Matter of fact, feeling really good. And so then I started to do a sensory check. I'm like, I know it sounds very rational, but I was a very rational person. So I was like, what do I smell? Ooh, I smell Monsieur Floren's urine. That was my roommate, Monsieur Floren. I could smell his urine smell.
Hmm.
It's like, ew, ew. Um, and then I can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights in the ceiling real loud. I mean, it's like not like a roar, but it was real. I would hear them humming really loudly. And then I looked and I realized that in our, I was an art teacher. So like in our vision, we see 180 degrees with if you have two eyes. Well, I was seeing way more than 180 degrees. And I'm going, ooh, that's so weird.
Yeah.
And then I checked my depth of field, which is, like if you focus something far, your near is out of focus and vice versa. I was going like, I have complete depth of field. I mean, I am focused on everything. And then I'm like, touch. And like I'd already touched my body, and it's like, whoa, like really, very sensitive. And then so I'm doing the bottoms of my feet, and like I could read the texture of linoleum through my feet. And I'm going like, wow, this linoleum's like so cool, And so I'm really getting excited about all my heightened senses. And of course, the thing that's most exciting is no pain, like whoopee,
Right.
I'm healed.
Right.
So I'm healed. And so I'm looking around the room, and my wife's on the other side of the bed. And then I notice in the bed, mostly covered by a sheet, but the head not completely covered, was a person. And I looked at the person who was facing my wife away from me. And to my horror, it bore a remarkable resemblance to me. Now, I knew rationally that wasn't me, because I was standing there, and like rational people know you can't bifurcate. And, I mean, that's crazy stuff. That's schizophrenia to say that like you were standing over yourself, looking at yourself, right? Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not nuts. That's not me. So then I'm thinking, how come it looks so much like me? Because could it be a coincidence? No, that's ridiculous. So I'm trying to think of a scenario. So what I came up with, which I realized was absolutely ludicrous, is that the French hospital personnel had made a wax replica of me and put it in the bed. And then I realized, one, they didn't have the time to do that. And that's like takes a lot of skill, because it was a very good replica. And three, like, what would be their motive? I mean, why would they go to all that trouble and expense, to replicate
This great wax replica.
No, I mean, I'm telling you the truth. Okay?
It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, looking back was funny. At the time, it was very disturbing. So it made me angry. I'm going towards anger. And then I tried to communicate with my wife I can't give you all the cuss words that I used to use, but what the effing
Yeah.
going on here.
I wrote my book literally, and so there were 17 F words in the first two chapters that I had to take out after the first draft.
Well, anyway, so I'm yelling at my wife, who's sitting there with like her head down and tears running down her cheeks, and I get no response. And it was like infuriating, because like one of her techniques to punish me when we were not getting along was to ignore me. It was a pretty common strategy on her part to pretend that I didn't exist. And so I figured, okay, she's really mad at me for being sick and our whole trip to Europe being ruined and stuff like that. And you know, we're supposed to fly the next day, and like that's not going to happen. And we're losing that ticket, you know. So I'm figuring she's really, really mad at me for what I have done to her and ruined her life. And so I turned to my roommate, Monsieur Florent, who was a 68-year-old, super kind, sweet, sick Frenchman. And I mean, he didn't have anything against me. You know, I mean, we'd only met that day, you know, like I hadn't done anything to him. And I tried to talk to him. He looked through me like he couldn't see me, which of course he couldn't. I didn't know that. And I started yelling and screaming at him. And no response. And now I'm really agitated, very, very agitated.
So you still don't realize you're dead?
On the contrary, I'm more alive than I've ever been.
Yeah.
I asked Jesus later, I said, so what happens to people when they die? And he said, it's a really big problem because he said, usually when people die, they don't know they've died because like when they were dying, they were in suffering. And when they die, the suffering's over. And so they feel really good. So they think they've gotten well and they don't know that they've died at all.
Yeah, I did a little dance, a little jig. I was like, woohoo!
Yeah.
This feels good.
I mean, it's funny because people are terrified of dying. It's like, no, dying's really great when you're not doing well, you know?
Yeah, it's a release. Nature's kind. It releases you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So when did you realize you were dead?
Yeah. So I heard people outside the room calling me by name, which I thought was strange because I was in France and surprisingly, the people in France speak French, and Howard is not a French name, which nobody could ever pronounce correctly. But anyway, so they were speaking English. Howard, you know, come with us. So went over the doorway of the room, and there were people out in the hallway, and the hallway was gray, like a really, really bad black and white TV picture, very fuzzy, which was weird because the room was so ultra clear. And the hallway was very indistinct. And there was these people out there and they're saying, come. And I said, are you from the doctor? I'm sick. I'm supposed to have surgery. I've been waiting like, you know, all day. And they said, we know all about you. We've been waiting for you. Hurry up and come with us. So after some convincing, but never admitting anything, I became sure that they were hospital people to take me to surgery. And considering the treatment that I'd had in this hospital up to this point, the fact that they wanted to walk me to surgery made perfect sense. I mean, I never questioned that. And so we went on a long journey. I'm probably going into way too much detail for you.
This is where you're taken to hell?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't want to stay there for a long time, if you want to give the highlights of that, that is fine. But
well,
yeah. The lowlights.
Yeah.
Very low lights.
Well, just a few observations. Some things that I knew then, and nothing has happened in over 30 years to convince me that I was mistaken. That, like I said earlier, those people were there because they didn't have love in their hearts, love of God, love of themselves, love of one another. The Bible says people judge by appearances, God judges by the heart.
Yes.
And I think the people were there. It's not because they were worse sinners than other people. You know, the Christian faith says we're all sinners and all sin is equal. So we're all sinners. It's like it's an equal playing field here. The question is, what do we desire in our heart? That's the real issue. And that's what attracts people either towards the heavenly direction or towards the hell. Hell is separation from God, and the only thing that makes hell bad is the people there. God doesn't make hell bad. If they were nicer to each other, it'd be a lot more pleasant down there than it is. But what I found was The only, in their separation from God, it also means all the good things that God gives us, like there's no birds or butterflies or flowers or sunshine or rain or wind or there's no candy, there's no chocolate cake, there's no ice cream, there's no hamburgers. It's pretty bleak. And so what people do is what psychologists have found when they cage a bunch of animals in a cage for a period of time, they start gnawing on each other because that's the only gratification they get.
Yeah, you're reminding me of some paintings that I've seen which depicted hell, which this is in South Korea, but people are eating their feces and eating each other. And
Yeah,
really, it's just the most grotesque, horrific painting you
yeah,
can imagine. And so it
yeah,
sounds similar.
yeah. And so it's a miserable existence. And the thing that's so sad is like, well, I became, I'm sure you watch a lot of Turkish prison movies, you know.
Not really.
Oh, you don't? Oh. Well, anyways, in prison movies, there's a concept of the new fish. When when a new inmate comes into the prison, like everybody's excited because they want to initiate them, which usually means brutal rape and other things, right? So I was new fish. So hundreds of them had their way with me. And that's all I want to talk about. That's all I want to say about that. And you know,
yeah, it's overwhelming.
You don't want to know about that.
Yeah, it sounds like as beautiful as the love is, the lack of love is just as horrifying. And
Yeah,
so
and the pain of it is the physical part is awful. But the emotional part is much worse than the physical part. When it was happening and after it happened, it's like, how could they want to hurt me that much? Why do they hate me that much? You know what I mean? That's the part I couldn't. I can't understand, because you know what? I know why now. Because they don't care. I'm going back to this theme of the ultimate hatred, the ultimate violence is apathy. They didn't care about me. I was just a thing to try and gratify, a few moments sensation.
And that sounds like human trafficking or any of the horrible things that go on in the world. There is a not caring that this is a human being.
Right.
That this is, someone is being harmed, and there's no care. It's just monetary, or it's just...
When you think about doing something like that to a child, male or female, and you and I think, how could a human being do that to a child? Because children are just so delightful and precious and lovable. And how could someone do that to a child? Yet it happens all over the world all the time, including to my wife, etc. I mean, when she was a child. But anyway, it's another story. So anyhow, they don't care. I mean, they weren't doing it to me. They weren't doing it to me personally. It was just, I was new fish. I was fresh meat. And when they were done with me, by being done with me, is I was no longer responsive, physically and emotionally, too far gone. The term that I like to describe was I was roadkill.
Yeah.
And in that place, I heard a voice that said, pray to God. I literally heard a voice say, pray to God. I don't know who said that. I don't know where it came from. It kind of felt like it was like here, coming out of my chest, which I think it was coming out of the Spirit of God that was in me. But I'm just speculating here. I mean, at the time, it's like, who said that? I mean, it's like, who said that? And I thought, what a stupid idea. I don't believe in God. I don't pray. And the voice said, pray to God. And I thought, I don't know how to pray. I haven't prayed since I was a kid. It's like, I don't pray. I'm not a prayer. Forget it. The voice said, pray to God, real strong. And I thought, okay, what would that look like? I mean, it's just pure, I'm just speculating on what would it look like for me to pray. And so I'm thinking, okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Oh, no, let's pledge allegiance. 7 years ago, our forefathers brought forth in this continent a new nation. No. That's Abraham Lincoln. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as a gentle rain upon a place beneath tis twice blessed. No. Shylock, oh man, I can't think, like, I mean, I'm remembering things I've memorized because, of course, from my perspective, 38-year-old genius, college professor, department head, I thought prayer was something you memorized when you were a child, right? Which is very, very elementary and simplistic understanding of prayer. Anyhow, so I'm trying to remember, and like I finally come up with like, the Lord is my shepherd. And I'm so excited, I murmured it. I murmured it out of excitement that I actually remembered something that sounded like a prayer. And upon doing that, the people that were still around me, which they were no longer interacting with me because I had become tedious and uninteresting, they became very angry. And they said to me in language that's the worst language I've ever heard in my life. There is no God, nobody can hear you, and now we're gonna really, really hurt you. Like, basically telling me what we did before was nothing compared to what we're gonna do to you now, if you don't stop. Really, see, and this is a terrible commentary on them because they couldn't bear like my most miserable, pathetic little prayer. And then I thought of some other things like, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And I mean, I was only remembering like phrases. I couldn't remember like a whole verse, just little phrases. So I'm remembering this stuff, and I'm coming up with glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth goes marching on, and I mean, just anything that had any kind of like mention or association with God. So I'm saying this stuff, and it's really making them angry. And the thing that I liked was all this time I'd been defenseless, is no matter how hard I had fought to fend them off me, finally I find something they really don't like. And the other thing I noticed, that the more I said these things, and I was shouting them in anger. The more I said these things, the more it drove them away. And I could we're in pitch black, so I can't see anything, but I can hear them retreating. So like, yippee skippy. I'm really making them mad, and I'm driving them away. So I'm like letting them have it with this stuff, and I'm just repeating this stuff over and over again. And eventually I realized the only thing I can hear anymore is me, and I can't hear them. So like I become quiet, and I listen carefully. And I know some place somewhere they're out there, but I don't know where, but they're far, and that's good. And then I think about my situation and realize I'm stuck because I can't crawl, I can't move, I can't go anywhere, and I don't know where I am. And also, I know now, I mean, I didn't have to debate this. I knew that I was not alive, and I was not in the world. So I'm trying to think of my situation. And so what I could come up with, because I lacked any religious understanding, where I grew up in Massachusetts, we had septic systems and cesspools. We weren't hooked up to sewer lines. So what I came up with is that I had gone down the toilet and through the plumbing into the cesspool. And I don't know how into cesspool theology you are, but there's layers in the cesspool, like the
Dante's Divine Inferno.
Yeah, got it. But anyways, like at the top is floating the unprocessed stuff, and the deeper you go, the more it gets processed, and then it all becomes liquefied, and eventually then goes out into the leaching bed. Anyways, that's what I was trying to think of what part of the septic system I was in.
And what did you conclude?
I conclude that I was in the entry level.
Wow.
And that I knew that my life was filth, garbage, I knew that I was a selfish ass. I knew that. I mean, in the world, I never would have admitted that to you. If you and I met, if you'd met me as Howard Storm, Professor Howard Storm, at Northern University, I would have tried to impress you, with what a nice, good person I was. And it was all hypocrisy. It was all lie. Basically, I want to get in your pants. Okay? I mean, sorry, but that's just the truth. Or if not that, get you to admire me and be a fan, all you would be to me is someone to support my ego,
Yeah, and that ego, I was very judgmental before my near-death experience, and I saw that as a problem too, that even my thoughts, my negative thoughts about other people kind of harmed this beautiful connection I could have with them. Did you see that, wow, there's just so much more potential and possibility for human interactions because of your near-death experience?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, now, I genuinely make an attempt to love everybody I meet exactly where they are. And basically, I know I'm a preacher and that's a dirty word, but I'm not out there to exploit anyone,
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyhow.
Yeah.
So I went through my life, and I'm not going to go through my life with you unless you've got
No, but you had the life review.
Well, no, not yet. I did my own life review, and what I concluded was that, I know this sounds funny, but I graded myself after I went through my life, and I realized that I was basically F and D's in every department. My relationship with my father, my mother, my sisters, my students, my friends, my wife, my kids. I just gave myself F and D's up and down the line, because all I could see was all the ways that I had failed. And I felt real, real bad.
Were you judging that in terms of how much love you gave to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I realized that I belonged in the place that I was, and that I was stuck there, and nothing was ever going to change it. And that the only way that I could have any kind of an existence in that place was to somehow pull myself together and to become more vicious than they were. In other words, before you got a chance to bite me in the neck, I'll rip your head off. That would be our greeting. You go for my neck and I rip your head off, right? That's what, and I thought, I'd rather not exist than live like that, because I'd rather not be than be one of them. So now I'm in a dilemma, because here I am, there's no way out. I have no way of knowing how, yet they're going to come back, and I can't count on this prayer bit, which was quite insincere. It wasn't from my heart. It was just like, it worked. It was, but how long is that going to work for me?
Yeah.
And I went into the deepest despair. Here I am in the cesspool, and now I'm emotionally, spiritually sinking into a deeper hole. I'm like, there's no way out of this. And down in that hole, my little mind's working, trying to come up with something. It comes up with like a 8 or 9-year-old child sitting in Sunday school singing "Jesus Loves Me."
And that's what saved you, isn't it? That was the thread.
Because it wasn't the idea. The words were good, but it wasn't the words. It was like, when I was a little kid, I believed in like this God / Superman. And when, the alligators and bears that live under your bed that are trying to bite your toes, remember them?
Oh, yes.
Well, okay, good. When they would start snapping at my toes at night, in the middle of the night, I would pray to Jesus and they would go away.
And so you believed in some power that Jesus had, and so that gave you that link to a greater power.
Yeah. And that, I am telling you the unvarnished truth of the extent of my faith at that point. Like, hook me up, you know. And then of course I'm having voices in my head saying, you don't believe this silly stuff, like that, you were a child, you're an idiot, you know, it's not true. And then the other voices were saying, why would he care about you? You've done nothing but use his name as a cuss word for the past 20 years, like, he's not going to listen to you. Even if he did exist, he hates your guts. I mean, I'm having all this stuff going on. And then, like, finally I'm like screaming in my head, like, stop it, stop it, stop it. And I just yell out into the darkness, pure desperation, Jesus, please save me. Without the faintest idea whether there was a Jesus or not a Jesus, or whether he liked me or didn't like me, or, I mean, I had nothing except this faint hope that it might be true, based on something I experienced as a little child.
And I remember reading that it was like a light, and you saw the light getting closer, and you saw Jesus coming for you.
Yeah. And
when was the first moment that you felt love, like where you felt, okay, this is the shift?
This impossibly bright light, like if it was actually light, it would have burned me. It was that bright, but instead it not only did it not burn me, it was like so incredible. I was like, so overwhelmed by the brightness of the light and its beauty. And then, like, I looked down at myself and I saw gore, and I was like, ew, I was really gory. I hadn't seen myself. I mean, I had been eviscerated. Okay. Not pretty. And out of this light came hands and arms, and he touched me. And when he touched me, three things happened. One is all the gore just started to disappear, and I became whole. This all happening not instantaneously, but pretty quickly, like 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, like that. The other thing that happened was I was filled with ecstasy instead of being simply just nothing but pain from head to foot. Now all of a sudden that the pain goes away and I'm filled with ecstasy. And lastly, and most importantly, I experienced a love that I had never known that existed. And unfortunately, I haven't found any language yet that can begin to describe it. And I would love to find that language, but
that's where we all break down.
I wish you'd help me out on this.
Yeah, that's where we all break down, because it's so many things all at one time. I felt comforted, safe, ecstatic, loved. I mean, it was like an explosion of everything good that you can imagine, and yet at the same time cradled and safe, and at the same time free. So there's all these contradictory elements that occur at one time, and it is hard to put into words. So yeah, if you felt that, then you were feeling better than you'd ever felt in your entire life, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually.
And it's frankly that time is all I care about and all I live for, and what I have to refresh myself with through contemplation, meditation on that, and what I anticipate experiencing again fully at my great Hallelujah Getting Up Day.
Yeah, so that, I think that's what we teach a lot of people to meditate on, is just to imagine that love and being that loved, and to feel what that would be like in every cell of your body, to be that treasured and that loved and that adored. And that is what we need to remember, I think, from that love of God. Yeah,
and it's not inaccessible. It is, in fact, accessible if you want to put forth the. I tell people all the time. I won't go through the whole detail, but I tell people how you can get to that step by step by step, and it works for me. And some people that I've suggested this to, it's worked for them, and I think it would work for anybody if they followed. I believe it would work for them if they followed the plan that I laid out. But it, if it takes a few hours, it's like, what's a few hours? What if it takes you 6 hours? So what?
Right.
It's like going to change your life. It's gonna help you out a lot, and it's free.
Yeah, the same thing with changing your life. So what if it takes 2 years to get everything in order? At the end of those 2 years, you're living a much better life. So
right.
Yeah. So you felt this incredible love with Jesus, and you also experienced angels too, didn't you? Or knowledge of them?
Okay, he picked me up. He held me real tight. And I just want to add one more thing. When he held me, I knew that there was some, besides all this healing and love and all that, that he really, really liked me a lot. Matter of fact, I'm his favorite person in the whole universe. I have to add, unfortunately, you are too. And so is everybody else.
Yes.
But it makes you feel like,
yes.
it makes you feel like you're the only one. I mean, like, as if I'm the only person that ever existed, you know? I mean, it's like that.
Yeah.
His love is that intense, and it made me, and he likes me. I mean, he doesn't dislike me. He's not, you know, he's not mad at me. He's, you know, he's happy.
And why are we so hungry for that as people? I think we don't experience it enough in this world. This like full, I mean, dogs try to give it to us, little kids try to give it to us.
Yeah, my doggy does give me that.
But you know, other people sometimes just can't love us in that way, you know, that full unconditional open-hearted way.
I can tell you why, because we get reject when we try to act like that, when we act like little children, just go up and like throw our arms around people and tell them we love them. You know what? I tried that after my near-death experience. Doesn't work.
Me too.
You get shoved away. I mean, people say really bad things to you.
Yeah. You were a 38-year-old man.
Or people miss it, or people totally.
Oh yeah, I was a 22-year-old woman, so you know, men were falling in love with me right now. Like, and I was like, no.
Yeah, I didn't mean that kind of love. I know. I mean, I was a 38-year-old man, and I was getting, you know, it just wasn't working out right.
Yeah.
And as a pastor, you know, one of the things that's frustrating is like we have like boundary training every few years, mandatory boundary training. I'm not allowed to touch anyone unless they initiate it. Yeah. And I'm sure not allowed to tell people that I love them so much or anything like that. I mean, if I did that, I would be defrocked.
But you know what's interesting is when I do like kind of jokingly tell my students, "Oh, I love you guys," I see them smile. You know, like there's this sense of everyone wants to hear that they're loved. You know, there is this need for it. Okay, so keep going.
So I'm holding on to Jesus. I'm crying, happy cry, and he's rubbing my back. He gave me a nice, very soft, tender back rub, and we take off. And just like flying in a helicopter, except it was just Jesus and me without the helicopter. And we start moving, and all I'm aware of, because like I've got my face buried in his chest and neck, was we're really going. I mean, like I know, and actually I'm a little bit scared because I'm actually thinking, I hope he doesn't let go of me.
Decide he doesn't like you that much.
Yeah. But anyway, so we're moving, and I'm trying to get my act together because I'm feeling I've put a lot of slobber on him from my nose and mouth, a lot of slobber. And I'm feeling bad about that because I don't have a hanky to clean them up or anything. And okay, so I'm trying to get together. So I get enough together, and I look and I see like we're moving towards a world of light, and all around the world of light, like a bazillion little lights going in and coming out, and there's all this activity. And I had this gigantic, the God that I said wasn't, we're going to his house. We're going into his territory. I mean, I know that. I just know that somewhere in that big galaxy of light, if you will, there's God in that, and we're headed towards it. And I am the biggest idiot in the whole world. And they probably hate me, you know, because of what I've said and done. And I think to myself, he's made a terrible mistake. I don't belong here. And with that, we come to a stop, and we are outside of the world of light, which we could call heaven, because that's what it was. I call it home. And he spoke to me for the first time telepathically, and he said, we don't make mistakes. You belong here. And I thought, how do you know what I thought? I didn't say that. Can you hear what I think? And he laughed and he said, I know everything you've ever thought. And I thought, I feel real uncomfortable with you knowing everything I've ever thought, because I've thought things that I don't want you to know that I've thought. And immediately I thought of something that I didn't want him to know that I thought about, which was I thought of a breast. I've always been a boob guy. Too much information, huh? Okay. No, that's what I mean, seriously, that's what I thought of. And you know what he did? He laughed and laughed and laughed.
He laughed. That's funny.
He thought it was really funny. And I thought, oh, he thinks I'm funny. He said, yeah, you're real funny. And I was like, he thinks I'm funny, because nobody thinks I'm funny. I mean, like, I have a wicked sense of humor, but it's New England. It's very dry. You know, I make like a lot of jokes, and people look at me like, what's your problem? You know, it was humor. Excuse me. You know,
Funny.
I mean, have you noticed I'm funny? You know?
Yes. Have you noticed I'm funny? I'm
so
very
anyways,
silly.
So he liked my, you know, he thought that was funny, and I thought, and he's not a prude.
Yeah.
You know, like, actually, boob is like, I mean, what's the big deal? It is what it is. It's not, it's not, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, it could have been worse, right?
Yeah.
And so we started talking, and he kind of interrupted our conversation, which is all telepathically. He had a young male voice, and he said, I got a bunch of people I want you to meet. And so he called out with tone, musical tone.
Mm.
And they came, and there was a group of them, and they formed a semicircle around us. And he said, they've recorded your life. I'm running through this quickly. There's a lot more, but
oh yeah, and I'll put a link to some of the other places where you've told your full story. But yeah, I do want to get to the angels. He
said they've recorded your life, and they want to show you your life. So we proceeded to watch my life, and that was what I would refer to as a holographic projection of me interacting with people. And the interesting thing was that there were props, but usually not a background, only when the background was appropriate. So it's like people, it would be like,
that's the way it was for me too.
Boy, my mother at the kitchen table, we got tables and chairs and a floor, and the rest of the kitchen just isn't there at all. It's like
so hard to explain. But you're doing a good job of it. It's like the images just kind of pop up, and you see, okay, here's me interacting, or here's me thinking this and being a part of this scene. But for me, it was projected onto this starry sky. That's where I had my life review, and I just saw the scenes that I needed to see. Maybe not the whole life, but just ones that were important.
But for me, it was in chronological order, and sometimes we'd go into a scene and like see what happened to the person after what happened to them after we'd interacted, or what they were feeling. We'd feel what they were feeling.
You went in chronological order. I went backwards. That's interesting.
Okay.
To your childhood.
Yeah. And the thing that was difficult is that as I became an adolescent and became more and more of a Übermensch, which was my goal, Nietzschean Superman, I was more manipulative and detached from people, and Jesus and the angels clearly shared their unhappiness with the direction that I was going. Not in a cruel way, just like, it's really disappointing,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt their feelings, and I felt bad that I was such a disappointment. They weren't angry, they weren't mad, they were just disappointed. Because what I ultimately learned from the whole thing was that we were created to love one another. That's our job. That's the curriculum. That's the whole thing in a nutshell, and that's the only thing that matters. And what I was doing was moving away from that. So ultimately, I had a career, I had a wife, I had kids, I had a house, I had cars, blah, blah, blah. I had all that. I had the American dream, and I was going somewhere, and I won prizes at art shows, and I got tenure, and I was a full professor, and I, blah, blah, blah. And none of that mattered. And they let me know that none of that mattered at all. Matter of fact, it was very surprising disappointment, because I'd say, look here. I got, I'm a full professor. I'm 26 years old, full professor. Nobody gets that, I'm like, yeah, well, as of no consequence at all. Look here where you ignored a student who really, really needed a friend. And then they would feel so sad for that student. And it's good. It's Homer Fields, by the way. That was his name. It's Kentucky. Homer Fields. What a great name.
That is great.
And Homer was looking for a friend to talk about his girlfriend who had dumped him. And you know what? I really didn't want to hear his BS about his 18-year-old broken heart. It's like, I kept thinking, they don't pay me enough at this university to listen to this crap. That's what I kept thinking as he's crying in my office.
It's interesting, and that I was sent back to teach, and I was sent back for those students, those exact ones. And I've been so aware that people commit suicide at young ages over breakups. People lose it, and it may seem like nothing to us, but it's the first time they felt that kind of a massive heartbreak. And if they're from a fragile background, their psyche's already damaged in some way, it can be the difference between them living and dying,
and we are so blessed that for their own reasons, which are probably completely misguided, they have decided that we're trustworthy.
Yes.
And they want to share this and seek help from us. And
yeah.
We're blessed to be in that position, and we think it's an imposition.
Yeah.
On our valuable time because we're busy.
Yeah. I didn't feel that way, but I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to, so my near-death experience forced me to be a teacher.
I'm glad you weren't an attorney.
Yeah.
My ex-wife's an attorney.
Oh, I'd love to argue, but we haven't argued much.
So anyways, yes. we went over the life review, and as the life review went on into my adult life, I was begging them to stop it. I'm like, I got it. No. And they'd say, no, you got to watch it. So we went through the whole thing. It was brutal, and I made them very disappointed and very sad. But I got the point. It was real simple. We were here. We were supposed to love each other, and I completely missed it. I thought my life was about being the most famous, wealthiest, important, powerful person that I could possibly be. I wanted it all.
Oh yeah, I know.
To put it in very simple terms, what I wanted was I wanted a great big huge art book published by Abrams, and on the title, The Paintings of Howard Storm. And then under the titles you would see, in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in the collection of the Museum of Modern Art, in the collection of the Whitney Museum of Art. That's what I was after. And
I was after just money, plain and simple, because I grew up poor. And I just wanted as much. I didn't care who I married to get it. I didn't care who I stepped on to get it. Like in my mind, I was just like, that's security. That's what matters.
Yeah. Well, see, my father was like that, and he was all about money. So I was going after something higher than money, that a side product would be the money that come with it.
Yeah, but yours is like
the paintings would be selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was the fame that I wanted,
Yeah.
The money would flow. Anyhow.
So after that life review,
when we were over with that whole thing, he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "Yeah, I got a million questions." So I asked him everything I could think of to answer, and he answered everything.
And I love that part of the book. When did you feel that you had exhausted all of that, where you felt like, okay, I know enough? And are there things that you've forgotten that you asked?
I'm not sure. I forget whether I forgot anything. I'm not sure, but I don't tell everybody. I've never told anybody everything, because some of it gets like a little esoteric, and I think it's prudent to, I've gotten in trouble for stuff. I've had people tell me that I'm the devil and I'm an apostasy, and I've been accused of things just like real simple stuff. Like, for example, I'll give you an example of like when babies are either aborted or stillborn or die when they're very young, they just get another chance at life, and people have been furious with me and called me all kinds of names because Jesus told me that. And it's like, I'm sorry if you don't like Jesus' plan. No, he doesn't throw babies into hell, and he doesn't, and they don't.
Jesus and God, from what I experienced, was just pure love, pure, like a flow of love like I'd never experienced before. And so I think in any situation that we're met with love, and I would imagine that these children are met with great love. And even the people who make that choice, the culture may teach them to hate themselves for it, but they still can love themselves through
Yeah.
those moments. And I believe that, that they can still connect with God.
Another controversial thing that's got me. He not only told me, but he showed me, and we visited some places, that the universe is full of intelligent beings and varied life forms, and that, in fact, this world is one of the lowest of them all, and that there's a lot more spiritual, kind, good, loving, and intelligent beings all over the universe.
So you didn't put that in a sermon at your church?
No, I haven't actually. How'd you know?
That wouldn't have gone over so well.
So, anyways, when I couldn't, I mean, I ran out of questions. I just couldn't. I mean, I was starting to get kind of ridiculous. So I was just like trying to think up stuff to ask, because he's actually the best teacher I've ever known. He is like the model of teaching, and I must add, uses lots of AV stuff. Audio visual.
Yeah. Lots of descriptions and
I mean, we went places and saw things and experienced stuff like that. Some of which taught me not to ask certain questions. Like I asked him about the Holocaust. So we went to a death camp and got to experience the death camp, and very painful memory. And so that, okay, no more war questions. Like,
I remember that part of your book, the souls were, as soon as they were incinerated, they were just going up joyfully to heaven.
Yeah. So anyways, ran out of stuff to say. So I said, okay, I want to go to heaven. And he's like, actually, you got to go back to the world and try and, have the life that you were created to be in the first place. So we had a huge argument. And people always say, like, argument. I go, yeah, I argued with him as much as I could possibly argue to go to heaven. and he responded with kind, patient, rational reasons. And just to give you a brief sample of that argument, I said, why would you send me back to the world? Because it's full of cruel, mean people, and it's just terrible existence down there. And he said, that's true. There's lots of cruel, mean people. And he said, there's also very loving, beautiful people. And he said, what's in your heart is what you'll find. And if you have love in your heart, you will see the love in other people. If you have beauty in other people, you'll see the beauty in them. He said, it's what's in you is what you're going to find. And you know what? Amazingly, he was right again. I've been doing this thing for over 30 years 33 years now, since 85. And yeah, if you seek love and beauty, you find love and beauty. If you seek cruelty and ugliness, you find cruelty and ugliness. But I'm telling you, the love and the beauty is in everywhere and in everyone, including people that do not strike you immediately as either loving or beautiful.
That's a beautiful place for us to wind down, because I don't want to keep you all afternoon. I could,
Yeah.
but I do want to ask you one more question. Angels in human form. I think I read somewhere that you saw an angel in the human form later.
Yeah, several times. Yeah. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, just briefly.
Okay, so yeah, briefly.
We're going to do a part 2.
Yeah. You're talking to a preacher here. So when I was recovering in what they called the recovery area of the hospital in Paris at Cochin, the room was kind of dark. It was daytime, but the lights weren't on. The room lit up. And this young man, beautiful young man, really pretty, or handsome, I should say, in his like mid or late 20s, it appeared, blonde, wearing hospital scrubs, pale green scrubs with a V-neck, short sleeves, and sneakers. He comes into the room and he goes, Howard, how are you? I'm like, whoa. Once again, perfect English. No, kind of a surprise in a French hospital. And I asked him who he was, and he said, "Oh, I'm on the staff here, and I've just come in to check on you, see how you're doing." And I said, "Well, it's like feel like I've been run over by a truck and blah, 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 you know. But the long and short of it was, he said, I'm going to be watching over you, and I want to assure you that everything's going to be okay, but you've got a long recovery ahead of you. But I will always be around. And I said, great. I mean, he was so kind. And I said, so what's your name? And he said, don't worry about that. He said, you will never see me again. And I said, you just said you're going to watch over me and you're going to see me through this whole recovery, and you'd always be around. And now you're telling me I'm never going to see you again. He said, yes, that's all true. He said, I'll be around, but you'll never see me again. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. You know, are you going to be with me? He said, I will be with you. Always know I will be with you. And I said, no, I will never see you again. He said, you'll never see me again. And I said, very, very confusing. I don't understand. He said, now I have to go. So he left. The room when he left the room went back down to drab. And I'm sitting there like, what was that? You know, what was that all about? Crazy.
So even though you don't see him, do you feel him sometimes?
Well, wait, let me finish. So immediately the nurse comes into the room. And I said, what was the name of the doctor that was just here? And she said, there was nobody here. And I said, no, like the young doctor with the blonde hair and, you know, and the sneakers and stuff, you know. She said, there was nobody in the room. And I said, there was someone just in the room. He just left. You probably passed him coming in. And she said, my desk is right outside this door. I've been sitting at that desk for a long time. Nobody has been in this room or out of this room. And I said, no, you don't understand. There was this beautiful young man who was just here visiting me. She said, no one has been in this room. I have been right here by the door. Nobody has come into the room. And I said, well, you're wrong, because I saw her. And I got really upset, and she got mad at me because I was arguing with her. I mean, her English wasn't that good, and I spoke very poor French. But anyways, we were having this argument. She's like, she just gave up on me, you know, and she left. I believe that we all have a lot of angels. I mean, I saw my team, and he was just part of the team. When I went to the hospital, later on, the angels kept appearing to me. And when I went to the hospital in the U.S., which I was there for a few months, they were making daily visits. I don't know if he was, because usually when they showed up, they were showing up with the whole glory thing. You know,
do you feel them now the way I feel them? I don't see them necessarily, but just the other night, I felt two of them walking up the stairs with me, and I was like,
wow.
oh, they're here. And I know it like, you know, a wave comes into the shore. It's just this beautiful wave of energy, and that's how I describe it. Do you still feel them?
But I impose on them all the time. I mean, like, you know, for everything from parking spaces to finding discounts on something that I want to, you know, helping me to do stuff. I mean, they don't mind. I mean,
they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked them a lot for protection. That's one of the things they really like to do.
Yes.
And I tell people all the time, whenever you're scared, whatever in your danger, ask the angels to make a hedge around you. And like, you know, without being overly, you know, there's been a few times when the evil ones decide it's really tired of me and my whole act, and thought it'd be better to eliminate me. And he's literally tried, and the angels have always come through, you know.
Yeah. I feel like the more you talk publicly and the more people see you, it's almost like there's new levels of protection that you need on some level, and to call out for that.
Yeah, so I can't remember the politician who said, you can judge your success by the enemies you make. Well, me and the devil, we have a terrific relationship. Kind of a love-hate thing, you know.
Wow. I guess we're going to have to stop here. It's been a wonderful interview. I've loved it, especially since I've read your book and you've been so such a great guest, charming, and thank you for telling me
Are we
a
going to
lot
get to
about your
see each
stories.
other in
Austin, yes. Oh,
I
thank
think
you for reminding me. And that was like part of the reason why I'm interviewing you is, yes, Howard Storm is going to be in Austin at the Wisdom of the Near-Death Experience conference. And this will be May 24th, 25th, 26th, I believe. And this video will last much longer than that. But if you are in Austin in 2018, that would be amazing too. I will be there on Friday giving a workshop. And what day are you speaking?
um, I'm speaking Friday at 7 p.m. and Saturday morning at 9:15.
Well, I'll be there for both times.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, well, thank
So
you.
can I give you a hug and tell you I love you?
Yes, 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 we
Good.
can definitely hug and
Good.
express love to everyone there.
And you'll understand the spirit
Yes,
in which it is given, right?
yes, exactly. Well, thank
As
you
a
so much.
brother and sister in Christ or whatever, right?
Yes, yes. Well, thank you, Howard. Have a great
Okay.
day.
See you in a week.
All right. Thank you.